Ferrari has moved all his pieces on the board before the Canada GP, but what happens in Fiorano is much more than simple tests. Are they on the verge of collapse? Or is this the sign of a rebirth? Ferrari reached 2025 with a renewed illusion and an alignment that seemed unstoppable. Charles Leclerc as a natural leader of the team and Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, as a brand new incorporation after his departure from Mercedes. This pair promised a new gold era for Maranello. However, the season began showing a panorama that was far from expectations. From the preseason tests in Bahrain, the alert signals began to multiply. Although the car, the SF25, was theoretically an evolution of the SF24 that had fought the championship until the end in 2024, in practice it became a box of surprises. What should be a refined car ended up behaving like a capricious machine, which delivered performance only in extremely specific conditions. The engineers were quickly overwhelmed by the complexity of the aerodynamic package of the car. Small modifications in the front wing, in the distribution of weights, or in the height of the car with respect to the ground caused unpredictable changes in the general behavior. This technical volatility translated into days of chaotic disappointing classifications and careers where Ferrari's performance seemed more a matter of luck than preparation. Leclerc, who came from an exceptional 2024, failed to replicate his level with consistency, and Hamilton, even in an adaptation phase, found the lack of coherence between the simulator and the track frustrating. The Australian, China and Japan calendar start circuits showed even more the structural weaknesses of the SF25. The combination of low temperature in the asphalt, recent re-asphalted and specific technical configurations completely destabilized the red car. In several sessions, engineers found no clear explanation to car behavior changes between tire batches. This disconnection between factory work, the simulator and reality on the track became Ferrari's greatest enemy. Meanwhile, rivals such as McLaren and Mercedes found coherent and predictable lines of development. Ferrari revolved in circles, with more doubts than certainties. Internal, the pressure was palpable. Fred Vasseur faced not only with technical scrutiny, but also the symbolic weight of directing a team that has not achieved a title and now had one of the most iconic pilots in modern history. Hamilton's redemption narrative with Ferrari seemed to fade in the midst of technical noise. And for Leclerc, this situation was not new. Previous years was also fighting unpredictable cars. But now, with a teammate such as Hamilton, frustration was further expanded by the need to demonstrate internal superiority. In this volatile and emotionally loaded environment, Ferrari needed more than a technical redesign, required a deep introspection about its work structure, its correlation model between simulator and track, and its reaction capacity to the demands of a season where each point is worth gold. Thus, the decision to transfer part of its development to the Fiorano circuit, outside the official calendar, is not a simple experiment. It is, in essence, a scream of technical aid disguised as a test session. At the time Ferrari decided to activate his private test program in Fiorano, he did not do so as part of a planned routine. This was an emerging decision, born from brutal recognition that the SF25 as it is not enough to fight for the championship. The difference with McLaren, both in consistency and general performance, was increasingly evident, and the data collected on the track no longer coincided with predictive models. This triggered an emergency technical operation whose nerve center was the private circuit of the Scuderia in Fiorano, a land historically used to validate solutions when everything else fails. The tests are carried out under the umbrella of the FIA regulations, within the framework of the TPC, the testing previous cars. This forces Ferrari to use a car of previous seasons, the SF23, but does not limit its ability to extract valuable data. In this context, the objective is not to measure the gross performance of the car, but to detect deviations between what is simulated and what effectively occurs on the track. What is at stake here is not the stopwatch, but the validation of correlations. Each round completed by the development pilots generates data that are crossed with the virtual model of the SF25 to find inconsistencies and adjust the predictive architecture of the equipment. Arthur Leclerc, Charles's younger brother, plays a critical role. His driving style has certain similarities with that of his brother, which allows to infer car behaviors that can be useful without compromising the limited mileage quota that the titular pilots have. Dino Beganovic, meanwhile, represents the next generation of talent from Maranello and is giving him an experimental role, both for his personal development and to add sensitivity in the interpretation of the car. But perhaps the most strategic role is that of Davide Rigan. At 39, his experience in resistance and intimate knowledge of the Ferrari simulation environment makes him the perfect bridge between theory and practice. He knows how the SF25 feels within the simulator and can confirm if those sensations have a real equivalence. The work approach in Fiorano is not usual. The tests do not focus on long batches or career simulations. Fractional sessions are executed, where 1 or 2 elements vary per shift. Suspension configurations, aerodynamic incidence angles, motor maps, and even the behavior of the ERS under different temperatures. It is a surgical dissection of the concept of the car, not a race against the clock. This type of focus shows the nature of Ferrari's problem. It is not superficial, but structural. Broken correlations between wind tunnel data, CFD, and track indicate that the physical model of the SF25 could be badly calibrated from its base. This is the most serious thing that can happen to a Formula One team, because it means that all subsequent development decisions are based on erroneous assumptions. Fiorano tests are an attempt to emphasize that base model before the season advances too much to reverse the damage. Ferrari knows that he cannot introduce an update package in Canada without knowing first if simulations reflect reality. Otherwise, it runs the risk of intensifying problems instead of solving them. Therefore, each sensor in the SF23, each lap given by Riggin, Leclerc or Beganovic, every millimeter of asphalt traveled in Fiorano becomes one more piece of the puzzle. It is a watchmaking work and, at the same time, a high-risk operation. Because if the results of these tests do not give clarity, the 2025 season could be unrecoverable to the Scuderia. What Ferrari manages to decipher or not in Fiorano tests will have direct and immediate repercussions on his performance in the Canada Grand Prix. The circuit Gilles-Villeneuve, with its semi-urban layout and its highly specific technical profile, represents one of the biggest challenges of the calendar. It is a circuit where any error is punished hard, and where braking stability, low-speed traction, and aerodynamic efficiency in long straight elements become absolutely critical elements. These are precisely the areas where the SF25 has demonstrated its greatest deficiencies in the first 3 races of the year. Montreal does not forgive an unstable car or a team that doubts in decision-making. It is a circuit that constantly transitions between maximum speed areas and sectors where the car must stop violently to face slow curves. Here, the consistency in car behavior is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And that is just what Ferrari has failed to establish so far. The data collected in Fiorano will in theory to adjust the key parameters of the car for this challenge: distribution of pesos, suspension stiffness, behavior of the diffuser under load, and especially the interaction between the rear aerodynamic package and the ERS regenerative brake system. But beyond the technical, the Canada GP will mark a psychological turning point for Ferrari. If the car continues to show symptoms of erratic behavior despite the efforts made in Fiorano, the emotional impact on the team will be severe. For Leclerc, who has already experienced these frustrations for previous years, repeating errors could undermine his confidence in the team's direction. For Hamilton, newcomer to Maranello in the hope of reliving his legacy, another disappointment would consolidate the narrative that neither his experience nor his talent can compensate for the structural deficiencies of Ferrari. And for Vasseur, it would mean justifying, in front of the board of directors and against millions of tifosi, why the 2025 project is not giving tangible results despite having more resources than ever. As if that were not enough, the context of the championship does not respond. McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull are evolving every weekend. McLaren, in particular, has demonstrated an impressive ability to maximize points even on weekends where he does not start as a favorite. Mercedes, with Russell in full sports maturity and the young Antonelli adapting solidly, has shown a progression reminiscent of his domain years. Red Bull, although with internal tensions and with a newcomer Tsunoda, still has Verstappen accumulating victories. In this context, a bad result in Canada could leave Ferrari not only outside the fight for the title, but also vulnerable in the battle for the second or even third position of the Construction Championship. It is not exaggerated to affirm that Canada will be a kind of final exam for the technical approach adopted by Ferrari in Fiorano. A good performance would validate the strategy, demonstrate that the Scuderia is on the right path, and would allow the second part of the season with confidence. But if the SF25 is disappointed again, it will be a clear sign that the problems are deeper and that the point of no return has already crossed. What happens behind the closed doors of Maranello's private circuit is the type of movement that is only seen when an organization faces the dilemma between adapting or resigning. And in the case of Ferrari, resigning has never been an acceptable option. The team carries with it the weight of a story that does not allow second eternal opportunities. Each decision, each test, each adjustment made in Fiorano has a background that goes far beyond the immediate present. It is a battle to redefine what it means to be Ferrari in the modern era of Formula One. The closure of this test period will not mark the end of a problem, but the beginning of a new type of pressure, the obligation to demonstrate immediate results on the track. It will no longer be enough to talk about technical evolution, hidden potential, or pending correlations. In Montreal, the SF25 will have to answer with facts. The cameras will not record the sensors, nor the wind tunnel analysis, but they will record each curve taken, each effective braking, each advance lost due to lack of traction. It will be a public trial without space for excuses. On this board, Ferrari not only play points, his legitimacy is played as a contender. The symbolism of seeing Hamilton at the wheel of a red car on the Canadian podium, after days of silent tests in Fiorano, would have a devastating impact. Not only would he validate technical work, but would rekindle the spirit of a global hobby that has waited too much time.